الله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور انفسنا ومن سيئات اعمالنا فانه من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له واشهد ان لا اله الا الله وحده لا شريك له واشهد ان محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى اله واصحابه اجمعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. أما بعد عباد الله فإن أحسن الحديث كتاب الله وأحسن الهدي هدي نبينا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة. I praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as He should be praised. And I bear witness that there is no true deity worthy of worship except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that the Prophet Mohamed sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is His final and last messenger. O you who believe, have taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Fear Him as He should be feared. And do not die except in a state of submission, in a state of Islam to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. O you who believe, have taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And say the truth. Say what is correct. If you do so, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will rectify and correct your actions. And whoever obeys Allah and His Messenger, then he has already attained the ultimate success. Dear brothers and sisters in Islam, the best of speech is the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Quran. And the best of guidance is the guidance of His Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And the worst of matters are newly innovated matters in this religion. What is newly created in this religion is an innovation. And it will lead you astray. Whatever would lead you astray would lead you to hellfire. As for what comes next, dear brothers and sisters of Islam, today, inshallah, I would like to share with you some reflections on a hadith from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He would benefit all of us with that reminder from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this has to do with a hadith mentioned in Sahih al-Bukhari radiallahu anhu. When Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu said that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said as he was sitting with his companions, he was directing this conversation to them, and obviously to the rest of his ummah after his death and after the Sahaba. And he made an interesting statement. He said, كُلُّ أُمَّتِي يَدْخُلُونَ الْجَنَّةِ إِلَّا مَنْ أَبَى. So the Prophet ﷺ said, all of my ummah would enter Jannah except he who refuses, except those who refuse. Now it's a very interesting statement, and we should perhaps think about this. Because it's amazing that a person would actually refuse to enter Jannah, knowing that it is the eternal life that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created for His believers. One with limitless pleasure and enjoyment, and the best of which is looking upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, conversing with the other believers, and perhaps even meeting the prophets, alayhi salatu rabbi. A place where there's no hardship, no affliction, no pain. Who would refuse such an abode? And so the Prophet ﷺ, when he said this, all of my ummah would enter Jannah except the one who refuses, naturally asked, وَمَنْ يَأْبَى يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ? Who is this person that refuses? And then he said, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, مَنْ أَطَاعَنِي دَخَلَ الْجَنَّةِ وَمَنْ عَصَانِي وَقَدْ أَبَى. Whomever obeys me, then he will enter Jannah, and the one who disobeys me, then he has refused. It's if you put it this way, it's very simplistic.
It's amazing how simple really it is. But it should make us ask the question, in reality, what are our actions showing? Are we intentionally, actively, purposefully running away from Jannah? Refusing to enter Jannah? We should really be honest with this answer. Because as the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, he said, whomever obeys me enters Jannah, but who disobeys me, then he has refused. And so it's a very interesting situation. Because we should think to ourselves, why are we perhaps maybe running away from Jannah? We shouldn't. But in reality, aren't we doing things that we are, almost looks like that we are running away, turning the other direction, refusing to enter Jannah? What is it that convinces us to disobey Allah and His Messenger? That is the question. The scholars, rahimahullah, had placed several reasons. But to be honest, I'm not very limited in time, so I'm going to mention something that Imam al-Ghazali, rahimahullah, had mentioned. And it has to do with the enemies of the human himself. When he said, أعداء الإنسان ثلاثة. Right? He said the enemies of the human being are three things. And then he mentioned and he said, An-nafsu, which is the self, or the soul, and shaitan and dunya. The nafs, the soul, the shaitan and dunya. So I'm going to try to take all three of them, but at least two. Permitting time, we can address the third. So the first enemy, or the first thing that can take you away from obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from refusing to enter Jannah, is your own nafs. This is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He's talking about the nafs, He said, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. He has succeeded the one who has purified his soul. Purified it from disbelief. Purified it from sin. Purified it from diseases of the heart. Then he will succeed. That is the contingency. The condition is that for you to succeed, you need to purify yourself. قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. And he is a loser, the one that has installed in it corruption, allowed it to be corrupted, did not purify it, then he is ultimately a loser, because it will lead him to something else. Now, to better understand why and how, the scholars have addressed the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned that the nafs, the soul, actually comes in three types. And each one of us has those three, but in different variations depending on how much we purify our nafs. النفس الأمارة بالسوء والنفس اللوامة والنفس المطمئنة. Those are the three. النفس الأمارة بالسوء is the nafs that persistingly orders its owner, orders itself, persistently enjoins in evil. أمارة بالسوء. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, إن النفس أمارة بالسوء إلا ما رحم ربي. That verily the soul is persistent in enjoining in evil except the one who Allah has mercy upon. Except. Which means that perhaps maybe for many of the people, the automatic state for this is that it is almost like a wild beast that needs to be tamed. This soul refuses to be bounded by anything. Any sort of rules and regulation, even if it's good for it. It hates to be held down. It hates obligations and responsibility. And so, any form of action weighs down on it, it doesn't like it. That's the nafs al-ammara bis-su'. It enjoins you, entices you to do evil. And so it's imperative that we try to control it, to tame it, until it becomes malleable in your hand, to be led by you very easily. That's the nafs al-ammara bis-su'. Well, what about the second one? An-nafs al-lawwama, which is the reproaching soul. Reproaching, which means it's blaming you. And it can either blame you in good or in bad. Now what does that mean? It depends on which closer you are to, the first type or the third type. So that middle nafs will lean towards one or the other. When it reproaches you and blames you in things that are bad, it means that when you commit something that is bad, it blames you. It gives you that guilty feeling. What are you doing? Leave this, it's not good for you. Go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is a good one. It's good to have. But also you have to be careful that there's the other type that perhaps it might be reproaching or making you, blaming you in things that are evil. So things that are bad, when you leave them, they're like, why did you leave it? Look at your friends. They're enjoying themselves. You could have had a good time. So whenever you leave something that is bad, it blames you. That one is closer to the first type, which is an ammara bis-su', the one that enjoys an evil. So you have to be careful of this one. He also needs taming. And what about the third one? An-nafs al-mutma'inna, the reassured soul. The one that is reassured with the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that whatever He had decreed for it and guided to is best for it. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pointing it to the right direction. It trusts Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His promise in this world and the hereafter. It knows and it's reassured that when it obeys Allah, then He has truly succeeded in this world and the hereafter. And so what we need to do is to control it first until we are able to train it to become reassured. But the question is, how can we do that? I'm going to mention 3 quick things that perhaps can help us. The first is stop the shahawat, the desires. The one that the nafs, the one that calls for evil, what it feeds on is when you give it what it desires. It's almost like a cancer. The more you feed it, the more it grows. The more it becomes uncontrollable to the point that it starts controlling you. If you deprive it from the shahawat, from the desires, you weaken it. Yes, it will retaliate. Naturally. Because maybe we've been feeding it for too long. The beast has become too strong. But yet you need to deprive it to weaken it. You don't listen to it. When it comes to things that are haram or things that are desirable for you, but you know it wrong, stop it. But then you might still be a bit weak, so you need the second thing, which is to increase your level of iman. By increasing the acts of worship. I'm not talking about the mandatory obligation. This already has been set. The obligations must be fulfilled, but we're talking about something more than that. If you leave any of the daily 5 prayers, or even purposely delay it out of time, that is a major sin. You have already weakened yourself. So you need to fulfill your obligations. That's not even a question. But we're talking about doing things that are extra. Remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even more. Thinking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Doing dhikr. Reading the Quran more. That will increase your iman and help you. It is very important for us to strengthen ourselves so that we are able to resist that weakness. To strengthen ourselves. Now the last thing we can do, which is also very important, is that we hold ourselves liable. Meaning that we hold ourselves accountable by judging ourselves. By every single night, evaluating ourselves, questioning ourselves, how did we do today? Ya nafs, how were you today? Were you good and obedient? Or were you dragging me somewhere else? This is so important, that the point that Umar ibn Khattab, would quite often say and remind people around him. He would say, حاسبوا أنفسكم قبل أن تحاسبوا وزنوا أنفسكم قبل أن توزنوا. حاسبوا, which means evaluate yourself, judge yourself before you become judged and evaluated. Now this is not a foreign concept. This is in our daily lives we do this. There's always evaluations. There's a yearly report, a weekly report, a monthly report, tests to evaluate you. How good you're doing. Are you on the right track? You're not on the right track. A physical, medical check to evaluate your health, your vision, whatever it is. There's always evaluations. Why? To make sure everything is good. These are worldly matters. Aren't things that have to do with the hereafter more rightfully important? And so we need to evaluate ourselves. If not every night, at least every 2 or 3 days. Evaluate yourself. How am I doing? Those 3 would help us conquer and direct and tame. And nafs al-ammara bis-su, the one that's quite often persistent in joining evil. Until that will perhaps bring it to the point that it becomes reassured with iman in this practice. That is the first enemy. The one that will lead us away from obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger. The one that would make us almost as if we are actively refusing to enter Jannah. But what is the second enemy? Ibn al-Ghazali mentioned, rahimahullah, it was the shaitan. We know this. He made a promise a long time ago when he said, by your might, O Allah, bi'izzatik, لَأُغْوِيَنَّهُمْ أَجْمَعِينَ, I will mislead all of them. He won't leave any single one of us. He wants to mislead all of us. But he made an interesting exception. إِلَّا عِبَادَكَ مِنْهُمُ الْمُخْلَصِينَ, except those that you have chosen. He didn't say that. He said your slaves, عِبَادَكَ, your slaves, O Allah, that you have chosen. So it tells you by the description of those individuals that perhaps are able to defend themselves against the misleading aspect, the shaitan misleading them. And even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warned us. He said, إِنَّ الشَّيْطَانَ كَانَ لَكُمْ عَدُوًّا فَاتَّخِذُوهُ عَدُوًّا. The shaitan verily to you is an enemy, so take him as an enemy. It's already settled. But maybe perhaps we underestimate the abilities of the shaitan to really comprehend how dangerous he is, how conniving and evil he is. We have to remember that the one that calls to us to do bad things is a shaitan that has been partnered with us since birth. Each one of us, since our birth, a shaitan partners with them and is constantly with them, which means that this shaitan knows every single aspect and detail of your life, your strengths, your weaknesses, your secrets, what can lead you to Allah, and what can lead you astray from Allah, which makes him very dangerous, because this is what he would do. He knows when you are weak and he will come to you, and will be persistent until you do what he orders you to do. And the funny thing is, once you do that, he says, I am innocent of you. I am innocent. I didn't tell you anything. I didn't force you. All I did was call you. And the Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned an interesting conversation between Iblis and the rest of his jinn soldiers, the shayateen. He would ask them almost every day, what did you do? What did you do? And one will say, I kept at it, kept persisting, kept telling him to steal until he stole. I kept persistent, kept at it, told him to drink until he drank. And so forth, the other different types of sins. Including, I kept at it and convincing him to divorce his wife until he divorced his wife. This is what he wants. But even that being said, if you know that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not leave us without an armor and without a protection, a barrier that would help us. However, you have to understand that this barrier can be strengthened and weakened by our own actions. And the shaitan would always try to go through the cracks in that barrier. Sometimes they're gaping holes. So what we need to do, and by the way, the shaitan is easy to control. We can't converse with him and try to convince him to be good. But what we can do is it's easy for us to protect ourselves from him. The nafs, by the way, is harder to overcome. It requires an immense amount of patience. The shaitan, on the other hand, all you need to do is defend yourself and ask protection from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you pray your 5 daily prayers, that is a protection. When you do your afkar, that is a protection. When you constantly remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that is a protection. To the point that the slightest waswasa, all you have to do is remember Allah and say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem, it's gone. But yes, be always on guard that they will always try to be there. And beware of weakening your defenses by sins. Because this is what weakens our defenses. The more sins we do, the weaker the defenses. The stronger the shaitan is able to get through these defenses. The more he is, the stronger he is, the more the ability he has to perhaps affect us. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from these things. But really the keys for this one is to increase our iman. Similar to the first one, there is a common denominator between them. And it's simply to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم. إن الحمد لله حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. Dear and sisters in Islam, just to recap, we're talking about the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ where he made a statement that we will all enter Jannah except those who refuse. And then he mentioned those who refuse are the ones that disobey him. And so we're discussing what are the things that perhaps that convince us to disobey the Prophet and his messenger. And so it makes us as if we are actively, purposefully deciding not to enter Jannah. And we have mentioned that there are a lot of things, but we're only touching on 3. So far we touched on the fact that it's the nafs and then the shaitan. To be honest, I don't have much time to go to the dunya. But believe me, if you're able to control the first 2, the dunya will be much easier. Because the dunya in reality is neutral. It is us, by the way we look at it, we're able to decide how we're going to use it. When we realize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created this entire dunya for us, it's for you already, you don't have to chase it. But it's for you to use it for a purpose. But once you allow it to enslave you, that is it. And the key for that is adjusting the other 2. But what I want to end with is to mention, and I already touched on this, the common denominator. We will never be able to overcome our nafs or our shaitan except with one simple fact, is increasing our iman. By obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because our strength and ability to overcome these things comes from Allah. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. There is no changing your state from one to another, or the strength to do it except by Allah. So it's Allah that provides you with that strength. So the more we are connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the better our relationship with Allah, the more madad, the more support we have from Allah. But also the more we distance ourselves from Allah by the disobedience we perform. The weaker that link, the more vulnerable we are. Perhaps it might be better for you to think of sin as a virus that weakens your body. And when it's weak, things from outside can affect you. And the cure for that is being a pious Muslim, doing your obligations. You become strong and able to overcome it. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of the best Muslims possible that we can become. to be like those who want to walk in the footsteps of the Prophet ﷺ and his companions. The ones who are supported by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who are able to defeat their nafs so that it will become a reassuring soul. From the ones who are able to unshackle themselves from the chains of the shaitan, so that we will be free and soaring up high, so that we can be with the highest of levels of human beings on the Day of Judgment, so that we would not be prevented from seeing Allah and accompanying the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us to what is best for us, to enable us to perform what is best for us, in accordance to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, with complete sincerity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. اللهم اغفر لنا الأولاد الأحياء منهم والأموات وارحمنا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين ونسألك الهدى والتقى والعفاف والغنى ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا وعلمتنا وزدنا علما اللهم نسألك الفردوس الأعلى ما قرب إليها من قول وعمل ونعوذ بك من النار وما قرب إليها من قول وعمل اللهم أعز الإسلام والمسلمين وانصر الإسلام والمسلمين اللهم أعز الإسلام والمسلمين وانصر الإسلام والمسلمين ونستغفرك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين عباد الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون قوموا إلى صلاتكم.